Welcome to my live stream Write With Me session number 23, where I'm working on chapter 30 of Island Dawn on Maui. I dictate my books, and today my voice feels a little raspy, so I gotta be careful. But I usually dictate about 130 words a minute, and this is how I write my books. I've written, I don't know how many novels now, like 8 or 9 novels using dictation, and I expect to do this well into the future. And that's how I write my books, and what I'm going to share with you is just the experience of writing one of my novels. This book, Island Dawn on Maui, is part of my Maui Desire Series. You can see that right there. You can check it out on my website, aaronbelsing.com, and that's my pen name. For my real name, aaronrlinsdau.com, where I have my thrillers. And right now, just checking my notes, making sure everything's okay. Thank you very much for staying with me for these Write With Me live stream sessions and this current just regular Write With Me session. So, on with the show. Here we go. It's right before the big storm hits Maui and things get dicey. All right, we're going to record voice memos and begin recording. And just record in good old voice memos on the iPad. The palm trees began swaying more violently back and forth across the property. Mara stood there on the deck, leaning against the railing, watching as the waves began building up on the coast over the day. As they grew larger and larger, she began feeling the fear that she remembered as a little girl. She had been through one of those storms with her uncle and her mother. She remembered vaguely about 20 years before. She only had slight memories of what had happened, what got wet in the house, and the damage that was done. She was amazed how many trees had been knocked down by that storm 20 years before, and she told Glenn, she told Dean about it. Hey Dean, by the way, I remember this part of the house got soaked, and I can't remember why. If it was the groundwater swelling up or something leaking the roof, but he took her to the corner of Glenn's room, and she showed him where everything got damaged. And he said, okay, well, why don't we move everything out of Glenn's room as much as we can, the important papers and whatever else we can salvage. But we got to make sure the buildings, including that new building we found, or he laughed to himself, the old building that is now the new building to us. I've got Wes and his guys working on the roof and to shore everything up, but I don't think they're going to get done by the day. Plus, I don't know. And Mara thought for a moment and then looked around the room, envisioning what had happened in her childhood, and she said, well, they have to go take care of their families and everything too. Yeah, that is a good point. I think what I'll do is I'll ask them if they can work till noon and then have them take off for the storm, because it's been building over the Pacific for the better part of a week, and now looks like it's going to crawl right over Maui. Mara's face went slightly white. She had a darker complexion, and she held herself together pretty well. No, she couldn't. She had a light complexion living in Seattle, but if it were possible, the color began draining out of his face, or her face. Dean walked over to her and hugged her and said, look, honey, we're going to be okay. This isn't a hurricane. There's probably going to be damage. I mean, nobody's maintained this property for a while. Your uncle's just been struggling. And that's what Kenji said. I know, she replied, but it's still scary, of course. And then she stood back and looked at him and said, you called me honey. He bit his lip for a moment and then looked her in the eyes and said, well, maybe that was just a natural thing. I'm sorry. And he was just about to say something else when she cut him off, and she said, no, I actually like the sound of that. It's something I haven't heard in a while. It's okay if you use those sort of things. And would you be okay if that accidentally slipped out from me? At that, he smiled and said, "No, not at all. That wouldn't be a problem if it feels natural for you to use one of those cute pet names. Then I'll go for it." Pet names? She eyed him. "Are you sure you're not a dog?" Glenn walked up close and whispered in her ear, "Only a dog for you sometimes. So, let's get to it." He reached back and swatted her bottom hard enough that she got the attention, but not so hard as to be mean. She looked around the room. "Hey, maybe later, but I don't think we're going to have time for that." "Well, maybe we'll be one of those horny couples in a storm, right?" "Ugh." She growled and then marched off to Glenn's room to begin moving things to her mother's former room. Dean left the house and went over to, he found his path through the jungle to the house or the cottage that they found. And then she found Wes and his crew busy at work shoring up the roof. And Dean called out, "Hey Wes, how's it going up there?" A large head appeared over the eave of the house and called down, "Well, good and bad news. Good, we're making progress. Bad news, there's no way we're going to finish and bundle up this roof. This one's pretty rough, I'm afraid. Being in the jungle's really torn it up." Dean lowered his head and looked at the shredded leaves below his feet, all covered in mud and stomped all over. Then he rested his hand against the chipped white siding planks, cool to the touch, and he looked back up. "Well, do your best. And hey, by the way, Mara and I were talking about it, and you guys should probably leave around lunchtime because you might need to help your families too." "Yeah, me and the guys have been talking about that," Wes called back down. "That's totally fair. Is that okay?" Dean's eyes widened and said, "Yeah, of course. My gosh, I mean, I don't want you guys to put your families at risk when we're working here." Wes paused for a long moment as the breeze gusted around the roof. He held himself down as the rustle of the leaves in the trees began clattering and swaying against each other. He called, "Thanks, I appreciate that. Not many people say that, you know." Dean immediately replied, "Well, that's how we roll. So, yeah, please make sure to get all your gear and get safe. It's going to be a solid tropical." "Sure thing," Wes called as his head disappeared, and Dean heard stomping on the deep footfalls on the roof as he clomped away. Dean took a view around the house, seeing what had happened. He saw torn off, damaged shingles that had been replaced, and he saw a couple bags of discarded shingle bags. And he thought, man, these guys work really fast. I didn't even see them pull these bags back there. I'm glad I don't swing a hammer so much. He took leave of them and then walked over to the water line that they had shut off a few days before and tested the wheel. This time, after he had Wes spray some WD-40 on the fitting, it was able to turn, and he opened it and closed it just to make sure it was all sealed. And then he made his way back to the house and saw to see how Mara was doing. By the time he got back to the house, the wind was blowing strong, where the palm trees were whipping wildly across the shoreline. He looked and watched the dance of all the trees moving out of motion like crazy, chaotic dancers on a dance floor that had no one to partner with to fast music. He turned around and he saw that none of the birds were flying around and out of the trees, and he saw that they had gone silent, so he knew that the storm was well upon them, or well within range when the animals had hunkered down. Let's see. Dean took off his muddy boots at the door and then walked in, skating across the house in his socks, to find Mara moving rapidly back and forth between the room. And he said, "Wow, you really move pretty quick." He looked at the impressive pile of boxes and photos that she'd pulled off the wall. And Dean waited for her to reply, and she was so absorbed she didn't even hear him till she caught Dean out of the corner of his eye. She yelled and jumped and almost dropped the box. "Would you cut that out?" "What?" He put his hands up in a defensive posture, flexing his red dirt shirt from Kauai. She looked him up and down. "You know, you're covered in grime. It's a good thing you took your boots off. We'd be cleaning this place up." "Well, I would suspect we're going to be doing some serious cleanup. I'm kind of worried about those trees that are really close to the house, including that place those guys are working on." Mara asked, "Were you able to talk to them and tell them to get out of here by lunchtime?" "Oh yeah, they really appreciated that." Mara paused, box in her hand, muscles flexing against her white Green Day t-shirt with beige shorts and her socks on. She said, "Why is that? Why would they be surprised?" Dean replied, "Oh, you'd be amazed. A lot of construction people, they don't treat their people well." "A lot?" It's a blanket statement, but you'd be surprised." Mara shook her head, disappointed, and looked down at the box, and then shuffled into her mother's room and dropped it in an unceremonious pile, then came back out. "Well, let's go around and make sure there's nothing sitting outside that's loose that could blow around and smash a window, shall we?" In moments, Dean and Mara were back outside, looking at all the things that could blow around, and they were amazed at the potential dangers. Dean thought about it for a moment, looking at the loose branches, ladders, and equipment, and he said, "I think we better stop focusing on the house. You're pretty confident you got everything? Or stop focusing on the interior of the house. Are you sure you got everything?" "As much as I can," she thought. "I remember that corner got wet. I don't know why, but hopefully we won't find out. I didn't think about stuff blowing around out here, because if it breaks a window..." Dean paused, looking out to the shore, and Mara followed his eyes as she saw the trees whipping back and forth. "Are you sure this isn't a hurricane?" she asked. He shook his head and said, "No, this is just a tropical storm, but it's a solid storm, and you'd be amazed what happens. So, shall we? Where do we put all this stuff?" Your uncle's workshop, or, well, rather our workshop. That's always awkward to say, don't you think?" Mara replied, "You're right. I know it's my uncle's, but he's gone, and my mom's not here, so let's just call it ours." "Perfect. Okay, and that way no more awkward conversations," Dean said. "Look, we need to get our equipment into the shed, get everything battened down and buttoned up, because this is going to get rough." Just then a gust moved through the trees and whipped Mara's hair around her face, stinging her eyes, with her long, dark chestnut hair whipped in and out of them. She pulled her head back and grabbed a scrunchie from her pocket, a black scrunchie from her pocket, and she started swearing as she bundled her hair back behind her head. And when she got it all untangled and contained, she looked at Dean and said, "I'm glad I brought one of these this time." "No doubt, a woman is prepared." They both walked off together, cleaning up ladders, equipment, and tools, and bringing it to the shed. It was a long walk back and forth, the work shed being over 100 feet away from the house and nestled in the shrubbery. At least this place should be protected. Everything's up against it, so nothing could probably fall. I'm kind of worried about that little cottage, though. Me too, Mara said. They worked for an hour and a half, moving things into the work shed and jamming equipment, as much equipment as they could in there. When they were done, they saw Dean's crew walking towards them with ladders, tools, and work belts. Well, this is it, guys. We'll be back as soon as we can. A couple of my guys have houses, and they're prepared, but you never know what's going to happen, right? Absolutely. Dean walked up and shook Wes's hand and the rest of the men's, and Mara followed suit. Her small, feminine hand disappeared into the lunchbox that was Wes's hand, and she shook the hands of the other construction crew. One man paused for a moment and wiped his hand off before shaking Mara's, and she laughed as she held up her hand, showing it was full of grit and grime. At that, the man smiled a warm smile at her, shook her hand, and then they all disappeared in the work truck in minutes. As they bumped off on the rough road, leaving the area, Kinji appeared walking down, Kinji drove up in his beat-up Mazda 1000 truck and poked his head out. Hey, you guys gonna be okay? I've got my place buttoned up pretty well. Dean and Mara walked up to the side as he shut the vehicle off, spattered in mud. Kinji in coveralls and a work shirt, and Mara took the lead and said, actually, we're doing pretty well. I really appreciate stopping by. How bad do you think this is going to be? Well, the last time one of these things hit about 8 years ago, it was a mess, and we were cleaning it up for a good week, and there was damage. Like, what kind of damage? Mara asked. Your uncle had 2 trees fall on the house, and that other place you discovered, I don't know what happened to it because I didn't even know about it. So I'm prepared to. I've already got contracts out for guys to come in as soon as their houses are safer. Are you going to be okay by yourself, Kinji, or would you like to stay with us? Oh no, my actual house by itself is solid, but definitely keep your eyes out and give me a call, assuming we don't lose service. He smiled, shook their hands, and then turned his truck around, backed away, and then drove off. Do we have enough food and water for a couple days? Dean asked. Mara nodded and said, absolutely. Another gust of wind blew through the trees and washed over them, taking her words away. Dean wasn't standing very far back, but he found it difficult to hear her. The smell of green, crushed leaves floated through the space, and a couple of birds chirped in the trees but didn't fly up and out. At that moment, Dean paused and said he stepped up right next to her ear. I don't want to yell anymore, but you don't have to stay here. You can go get a hotel or whatever. Mara looked at him with a dirty look and said, I'm not leaving my property alone with you. What if you have a party or something here and I miss out? With that, smile crossed across Dean's face and said, perfect. Well, let's go have our storm party, and hopefully it won't be Southern style. Sounds good. Let's get inside, close everything up, and we'll see how this goes. They turned around and walked towards the house, and as they approached the stairs, Mara reached out and clasped Dean's hand. They walked up together, stomping up the wood planks. They both looked around, sighing, knowing there was much work to do, with leaves blowing all around the deck, and they only could imagine what was to come. Okay, that was 18 minutes of recording. Perfect, and I'm going to copy that out of the voice app. All right, you can see, just take my iPad off so I don't drop it. You can see the recording there, how much time is on there, and the words. It's super handy. It's not perfect. There's still a lot of editing. I have to put the punctuation This is not a free ride, but I can do so much more than hand typing that I would never think of writing another long form book without this. All right, so chapter 30 clocked in at pasting between the iPad on the Mac. Oh, so awesome. Yes, 2,689 words. Not bad at all. Let's see. Let me enlarge this so you can see it. There you go. That chapter right there, 2,000, whatever it is, 689. Great. Well, that was session number 23 of Write With Me, where I'm working on Island Dawn on Maui in the Maui Desire Series. I write adventure destination romance, and I've got other series coming soon, so if you're watching this later, know that there are more series that I write as Aaron Belsing, and also I write thrillers, the Grant Colson thrillers, and the SERA archive thrillers under my real name, Aaron R. Linsdau. Please check out links below in the description to everything I have here, and also there is a discount code if you search around for any of my books. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.